Okay. Okay, so this evening we are going to be talking about setting expectations. Sort of everything that we have learned to date has been for this moment, for what do we do with this knowledge? In the last courses, we learned about how to understand behavior, how to disassociate the behavior from the person, and look at behavior from an objective standpoint, and take away this sort of value judgment about behavior, and staying really objective, what exactly happened. We also learned in our last week's session how to establish what the function is, answering that question of why is this behavior happening without delving into our assumptions or our guesses about what we think is happening. So understanding the function based on what we can observe. Today, we're going to be learning about how to set expectations so that we can get the behavior that we want to get while building a positive relationship with your child. So we'll do a quick review. Of course, we know most behavior is learned. The environment is what generates behavior. We change the environment and we can change behavior, and that we commit to this and it'll happen. It won't happen immediately. We are building through this, we're building through this framework of positive behavior supports where we're looking at building relationships with your child, modeling the desirable behaviors, which is really going to be the crux of our conversation today, as well as the third point, which is paying more attention to the desirable behaviors, and then connecting the desirable behaviors with good things that happen. And that final bullet point will be our last session next week. So we'll just review really quickly what we talked about last week, which was the ABCs. And I had asked you to sort of start thinking about, or maybe jot down on some loose leaf paper, any behavioral pattern or any behaviors that you're seeing in this ABC format so that you can start to see the pattern and start to think about the function. The cool thing that we kind of reduced down in our training last week was the understanding that there really are only 4 functions of behavior. So the answer to why is my child doing this is found in one of these functions. Our job is to find which is the function that is primarily influencing whether that behavior is going to keep happening. Now, keep in mind there can be multiple functions. There can be multiple reasons that a child is engaging in a behavior. But there's usually a couple of really strong motivators and functions that we can identify. So we remember this example, but I always put it back up here just so that we know we're always talking in terms of this antecedent, behavior, and consequence. That's how we analyze and find the function. So we also talked about how you as a caregiver you also have functions of your behavior. And so in order to change your child's environment, and we understand we have to change our behavior as caretakers, or in my case as a therapist, I have to understand the functions of my behavior as well, and understand that I'm acting in response to people. So when a child does something that, particularly irritates me, I'm going to have an immediate response. Now, if I pause and plan my action, and I know that those particular behaviors irritate me and elicit a certain response, my job is to try to figure out how I can change my behavior as well in response. So what we're going to focus on today is really what is it that we want to see instead. When we look at the behavior, the undesirable behavior that's happening, and we say, this is not acceptable, this is not what we want to have, we've got to pay less attention to that. I mean, I want you to note it down and observe that it's happening, but the majority of your mental energy should be going on to this question: what is it that we want to see instead? So it's not going to be helpful for us if we keep thinking about all the undesirable behaviors that your child is doing. The question I want you to ask is, what do we want them to do instead? And probably that's actually a pretty simple answer in your mind, but if you think about it and if you're really honest with yourself, most of the time we just focus on the thing that we don't want to see. So I want us to focus on what it is we do want to see. Because remember, the behavior that we feed is the one that's going to grow. And I can tell you the behaviors that we're focusing on, the behaviors that we don't like and the behaviors that keep recurring and get a reaction out of us, those are usually the ones that we're feeding. And often the ones that we don't feed, inadvertently, we forget to feed them, are the ones that we do want to see. So we're going to learn how to feed them. This is just a review from last week. We saw this slide, but in this section here, it says, what do we want to increase? I want to think about this, going through some examples of typical behaviors. And what do we want to decrease? We're going to need to identify the behaviors that we want to replace the problem behavior. If you remember from last week, when we had that behavior column and on our ABCs, and we were talking about, the child stomps their feet or, runs away. One of the examples was the parent gives a direction and the child just doesn't respond. And I asked you at that time, let's think of the language that the child is actually saying, but they're saying it in the inappropriate way. In that case, where the child is just not responding, they're actually saying, I don't want to do that. So we're going to think about it, and this is going to be unique to everybody. I want you to think about what is appropriate for your child to communicate instead. Obviously, for an instruction, your child can't say, I don't want to do that every time. That's not going to be acceptable. But maybe you can make an agreement with yourself and your child where you say, I'm going to ask you once. If you tell me appropriately that you're not ready, that's fine. I'll give you some more time and we'll agree on some more time, right? So you can put in some parameters into what is acceptable for you. Can you tolerate them asking for more time, etc. We'll get into this more, but really I want you to think, what do you want them to be doing instead? Do you want them to be jumping up immediately and getting to following that instruction? If that's the case, okay, we can work with that too. So we have to really decide what it is that is your level of acceptability in your household. And then we need to teach and model that behavior, which sounds scary. Not all of us are teachers or modelers, but really, if it's a behavior that you're expecting your child to do, it probably means that it's a behavior that you've either seen other children doing or you remember being able to do when you were a child. You might think, I never would defy my parents. It just wouldn't happen when I was a child. So on some level, usually the behaviors that you're expecting are ones that you think that they're capable of doing. So what we have to do is focus on the fact that this is the tough truth. It doesn't matter that they should be doing something, right? The fact is they are not doing it. I often get, when I'm talking to parents about this, we really get hung up at this question of like, what should they do? What do we want to see instead? It sounds simple, but it's hard because internally we just think, well, they should be following it. I give them an instruction. They should just follow through with it. And we sort of get stuck there. But the truth of the matter is that they're not doing it. And if they're not doing it, that means that we need to do something to make sure that they're going to be doing that. And oftentimes that does come back to teaching. So we've got to spend time looking at or teaching what it is we want to see. So I'll give that example of we present an instruction to the child and they just completely ignore us. So most of the time as a parent, we're going to let it slide. We're going to let it go. Because again, we're maintained, our behavior is maintained by that escape function. We don't want to have that fight. But what we could do in that moment is you present an instruction and the child doesn't respond. Maybe that's the time that you get close, come up to them, and ask and show them what it is that you want to see. Hey, Johnny, I asked you to go do the dishes. It looks like you're really busy with your work right now. If you need more time, or video games, if you need more time with your video games, you can let me know, but it's not okay to just ignore me. All right? I think someone's microphone is on. If you could just go ahead and mute that, that'd be awesome. Awesome, thank you. So does that make sense? In that little moment, right, where your child is not responding to you and they're defying your instruction, how many of us naturally go up to them and tell them what we want to see or model what we want to see? Most of the time we'll just throw out a reprimand or use one of our coercion tactics. But it might be as simple as going up to them and not just saying, hey buddy, you're not listening, because that's not helpful. They know that they're not listening. But you can say, hey, look, I know that you really like this Roblox right now. That seems really awesome and you're really into it. But I need you to do this thing. I'm going to give you a choice. Do you need 5 minutes with Roblox or 10 minutes with Roblox? So you can explain to them that they need to communicate. They can't just ignore you. So we're going to model that, teach it, and shape it. This requires a little bit of work. It requires that pausing and that thoughtfulness on your part of just saying, hey, this is what I want you to do. They can't read your mind. So when we are thinking about what is the behavior that we want them to do, we've got to know what the function is. And as we know, we learned about this last week, but really, when we're talking about the child who is ignoring you, that's obviously, it's an escape function, right? He doesn't want to do the thing. So that's why my response of going up to him and saying, hey, it looks like you don't want to do the thing. Do you want more time? I'm matching the function. I'm determined, I'm knowing that this is about escape. He doesn't want to do the thing I'm asking him to do. So I'm going to give him an appropriate way of escaping or avoiding this thing that he has to do, because ignoring me is not appropriate and it's not okay. And remember, if your child wants to escape something, you don't want to allow the escape right after the tantrum. We talked about this a bit, where we want to create space. We want to teach the appropriate alternate method of communication. So for example, asking for a break before the problem behavior happens. So I'm just going to flip through each of the functions and so that we can get an example of each of these. So as we know, sometimes children may engage in challenging behavior in order to escape from situations, tasks, or people. That's my escape function. So for example, your child throws food on the floor, all right, and they're told dinner is over. Then your child may learn that throwing food on the floor means that they don't have to eat it. Pretty straightforward, right? So oftentimes we actually reinforce, or we kind of reward the behavior inadvertently when we're not focused on why did they do that? What was the function? When they throw the food on the floor, that's pretty clearly saying, I don't want to eat it. So when we respond with a punishment, as we think it is, saying dinner is over, well, woohoo, sweet, I don't have to eat the thing. I'll give you a great example of my mom, who actually caught on to this with my behavior as a child really quickly. I was a picky eater, and I had a standoff at the dinner table once. I was not going to eat her food. And instead of saying dinner is over, she said, hey, you can sit here as long as you want, or you can go, it's no problem. However, I'm going to wrap up your food, and it's going to be the next meal that you eat. And I thought she was kidding, so I'm like, fine, wrap it up, Breakfast came the next morning. My sisters were eating cereal. My mom brought out the dinner and was like, here you go, this is your food. And I'm like, excuse me? And I went on hunger strike for, I think I lasted until dinner time the next evening. But look, she did not let me escape from that situation. And trust me, it wasn't that she was being cruel or she was trying to starve me, but I was throwing a tantrum. I probably did not engage in some appropriate way of being like, oh, hey, you know what, Mom, I really don't like this broccoli. I'd prefer something else. I probably, did something dramatic, so that she was like, oh, no matter what, you are going to eat this food. And it taught me a lesson. It stuck with me. So that's an example of escape, replacing that escape behavior. So ways that we can teach replacement behavior when it comes to behaviors that are about getting out of something. If your child is avoiding a demand or a task, some strategies that could be effective would be, and this depends on the child, but for young children, you can use a first then board. Now this can either be visual or verbal. When you break it down so simply as, okay, first we're doing this, then we're doing that, that language can be dramatic. When we simplify an instruction and we make it very clear that the first we need to do this thing, then we can have this preferred thing. So in the example of the child who's not responding to you when you give an instruction, he's sitting on the couch playing Roblox. Hey, mister, first I need you to go clear your plate and then you can come back to Roblox. That has a really powerful effect simply because you're telling him what the behavior is that is expected and what the payoff is. And it doesn't have to be a fight. This is going to prevent escape behavior from even happening. And so it's likely that he's going to engage in that behavior because you gave him a first then kind of setup. That can work for teenagers. It can work for young children. With young children, I like to put it as a visual. And there are some really cool apps. One of those apps is called ChoiceWorks. You can actually make little schedules or a first then kind of checklist thing. The second one is a visual schedule. And again, this goes across the ages. For little children, it can be just visuals of pictures. There's a lot of great examples of visual schedules online. For teenagers, this can be as simple as having something on the refrigerator that sets the expectation that, hey, between the hours of 6 and 7 p.m., that is blackout time where you are expected to be doing homework and chores or what have you. The rest of the time is up to you, but this is the time that it is expected for you to be doing what we're having you do. So putting in some structure and schedule, that can really help to reduce escape behavior. Establishing good rapport. This one, it sounds silly, but it is important, and it's important with all of the functions, really, is that you want to make sure that you have that good relationship with your child so that when you do present a request or when you ask them to do something that's not preferred, they're going to be more and more okay with it. So establishing good rapport, it really means building that relationship on the forefront. So if you're having a struggle with your relationship with your child, carving out time with them in non-demand or chore situations and just spending some quality time together will help with some escape behaviors. For little kiddos, we often use social stories. So particularly kids who, have a problem accepting no. They don't like to hear the word no. They don't like to, maybe they struggle with routines. Social stories, a social story is just a story that sort of depersonalizes their experience and says, well, every child doesn't like brushing their teeth, but every night they brush their teeth to make sure that they don't get cavities and they don't have to go to the dentist. The end. That's a social story. It helps them sort of depersonalize it. Offering choices. Offering choices is a very good mechanism for escape maintain behaviors. And what that entails is, so that doesn't mean a choice of doing the thing or not doing the thing. What I mean by offering choices is you're giving them a choice between two things that are acceptable. So let me give you an example. If you're asking your child to clean up and they're like, you can tell that they're engrossed in the game, you can say, hey, I'm going to need you to clean up soon, but you can tell me, how much time do you need? Do you need 2 minutes more playing or 5 minutes more? And they'll say 5 minutes. So keep in mind there, you're not saying, do you want to clean it up or should I clean it up? That's not a viable choice because they're obviously going to choose that you should clean it up. And that's not teaching the behavior that we want. We want their behavior to be making a good choice and making a commitment to engaging in the right behavior. So when you offer choices as well, it helps a child feel control over their environment. So instead of just presenting an instruction for something that's non-preferred, when you give them a choice, they actually feel like they can own that decision. And then clear expectations of follow through, which is the second part of our series today. So those are some ideas for escape. We're going to hit into our tangible function when children engage in challenging behaviors to receive things. For example, your child goes up to their sibling at home and pushes them. And as a result, they get the toy car, right? So the one sibling was playing with the toy car and the other sibling comes up, pushes them, grabs the car. From that behavior, your child may learn that pushing others will result in gaining access to the thing. And over time, that can get worse and worse. So what we want to do is, let's see which one to start with. Some examples, some ideas for teaching replacement behaviors for tangible. One thing is we can increase the variety of activities that your child is interested in. So there's more things to help motivate your child. So if those siblings are playing and Johnny has the really cool rocket ship and, Jimmy wants it, well, we have to, if we have increased that we don't allow that kind of fixation or obsession over certain items or activities, and we make sure that we've taught some other things that they can be interested in, we can redirect that behavior really quickly. Teaching your child to accept no. This one's the hardest one of all of these, is teaching a child to accept no. And it's one of those sort of cold turkey things where the only way to teach your child to accept no is by following through with no. And not negotiating. So if you use the word no, I'm sorry, we can't have that. Remember, no is a complete sentence, and you don't need to explain it. You don't need to negotiate it. When you use the word no as a parent, understand that it will most likely elicit a response. So what I like to do is front load it. Before I am telling, and this happens in the clinic quite a bit, where I'm going to present no to the child who doesn't want to hear it. I'm first going to front load it. Hey, Johnny, I know that you really, really, really want to go play with the iPad. Unfortunately, it's not an option tonight, but we are going to be able to talk about that tomorrow. It's just not an option tonight. And then leave it at that. And when the tears come and the all of the emotional response that comes after hearing the word no, our job is to hold the line as a parent and as a therapist and as a teacher. No means no, and redirect quickly into something else, and don't return to that conversation. No means no. The other thing that I want to talk about is for tangible replacements. If a child is continually engaging in maladaptive behavior to access things that they like, I would suggest getting those things under your control. What I mean, I don't mean you should hoard all of the things that your child likes and take them away. But if you're having behavioral problems, and one of the things I'm hearing a lot from parents during this lockdown period, as we're kind of all holed up indoors, is that, oh, I can't get my child to do homework because all they want to do is play on their iPad and play on their video games. And that, to me, that's a tangible. This is a tangible function. And the solution to that is controlling access. I'm sorry, buddy, but you are not going to have access to video games, Netflix, etc., unless you've done your homework first. It's simply not an option. And we're going to set in some contingencies where, first you do your homework, then you have unlimited access, until bedtime or whatever. But it can't be an option where your child has the unlimited access first and then you're asking them to do their homework. It's not going to happen. You're going to have a struggle. So we've got to get those things under an expectation or under some kind of control. The other thing that we teach for tangible is just teaching to request it. So teaching your child to appropriately request. And you can interpret that however you want in terms of appropriate requesting. To me, when my nieces and nephews, ask me for something in a whiny voice, I just simply ask them, oh, hey, try again. I don't understand you when you're asking like that. I want to hear you ask nicely. So I'm telling them what I want them to hear, what I want them to do, and you'll be surprised. They immediately flip their voice and they're like, I want the Xbox. I'm like, oh, no problem. Why didn't you say so? So teach your child the kind of requesting that you really want to see in the house. What is acceptable? What you want them to be displaying when guests are around, when grandparents are around, etc. And then transitional warnings. This one is a really good one for teaching the replacement for total meltdown or fallout when you remove a tangible. But when it's time to turn off the TV because it's bedtime, it's all over, instead of snatching away the remote and just kind of doing it, give a transitional warning. So, hey, in 5 minutes, and I'm serious, in 5 minutes I am going to take the remote if the TV is not off. For little kids, don't want to leave the beach, they want to continue that preferred activity, that being at the beach. When we're packing up and we're getting everything together, make sure they know not just that we're leaving, because they know that we're leaving. They can see the picnic basket and the towels and everything going in the car. Make sure that they know, hey, you can either help us clean up or you can keep playing in the sand, because in 5 minutes we're going to be in the car going home. So that it's really explicitly told to them that we are transitioning, we are leaving this place. Attention, as you know, challenging behavior can often get attention from others. Parents, siblings, teachers, peers. Attention is one of those, I'll say it's a big function. It appears a lot. And it can take many forms. As a caregiver, we provide attention in a lot of different ways. This can be really subtle, such as a glance, talking with your child. So, I gave an example earlier of Johnny on the couch playing Roblox, and I wanted to take the time to explain to him and say to him, hey, it's time, you can tell me that you need more time. I can see that you're engaged with this. You can tell me you need more time. Be careful. I knew in that situation with Johnny that it was an escape function because he wasn't looking for my attention. He wasn't looking for my reaction. He wanted to keep playing the game. So, but with behaviors that are motivated by attention, and you can tell when they're motivated by attention by either how their behavior looks, if they're looking at you for a reaction. A lot of the time, attention function behaviors look like the ones with like the fake tears, whining, all of that kind of stuff. Any of those behaviors that get this reaction for us, looking at them, talking with them about the behavior, giving help. It might sound counterintuitive, but sometimes you can get, the child's like, oh, I don't want to clean up my toys and da-da-da-da-da, and you think it's an escape function, but really you're like, okay, let me come help. It's really about just being involved, getting you down there and helping. Looking at the child, da-da-da, using a firm voice. All of these are ways to provide attention. And remember, a lot of times it doesn't mean positive attention or negative attention, like getting angry or giving them praise. Attention is attention, doesn't often matter. For some children it does, but what I mean by that is that getting angry, even if you think, okay, that's the kind of attention that my child definitely doesn't like, it could still be serving this function. For example, a child cries whenever you're on the phone, and then the parent yells, "Stop crying, I'm on the phone." The child may learn that crying when you're on the phone will result in attention from their parents. So again, just a simple pattern that could develop. So with attention, we want to teach your child new and more appropriate ways to seek attention. One of my favorite ones is having them tap on your shoulder. And making sure, I've included this here, reinforcing when these new behaviors do occur. So let's just say your child is used to shouting from across the house to you, and you don't like that behavior. So we have to teach them, hey, I'm not going to respond anymore when you shout across the room. That's not cool. It's loud. It disturbs everybody. The neighbors have been giving me calls. It's not happening. I want you to come up and tap on my shoulder, or come closer to me, or come into the room. Okay? What you have to do is remember to reinforce that behavior. So when the child does come in, let's say a teenager comes into the room, instead of shouting across the room, you have to be sure to be like, hey, thanks for coming in. I appreciate that you didn't shout across the house. And look, it doesn't have to sound so unnatural as that, but the point is, when they do the thing that you're looking for, make sure to attend to it, to give attention to it, because oftentimes these are subtle things. And remember me when my mom was on the phone and she, I'm giving her all those right, I'm tapping her, I'm saying, hey mom, hey mom, hey mom, I'm doing all the right things. And she kept ignoring that behavior. It's really hard to give attention to the right behaviors because often we're distracted. So I'm urging you to teach the new response, but also make sure that you attend to that new response. We also say give positive attention many times throughout the day. What this is it's something that we call in ABA, we call it non-contingent reinforcement. And all that means is give your child a check-in. Regardless of, what you can do is start to track yourself during the day. Like, how many times have you checked in with your child for no reason? What I mean by no reason is not, hey, have you done your homework? Or, hey, did you brush your teeth? What did you have for breakfast? What do you want for breakfast? Just check in. Hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling today? That kind of positive attention can go a long way, and it can decrease the child's neediness to receive more attention in different ways. Some children don't need that verbal check-in, but they want to be physical. They want a hug, a high five, to go play a game or something like that. So give them the opportunity to get that attention in an appropriate way. And then when undesirable attention-seeking behaviors occur, we're going to ignore those. And we're going to get into that in a bit because that's very hard, but that's what's coming. Okay. Oops. Sorry. We're going to skip automatic and we're going to go into setting expectations for the desired behavior. So what we just covered was looking at the matching of the function and some strategies to set us up for teaching the behavior that we want to see. Now we're going to focus on setting the expectation for that behavior to happen. All right, I've outlined some steps to setting expectations. The first one is you got to pick the right time and set the stage. Remember that positive behavior supports is about building the relationship. It's about building up a foundation where there's trust and there's mutual respect between the parent and the child, and we're avoiding coercion. So when we're setting expectations, we're choosing a time where everything is calm and everything is positive, and it's not a negative thing. Expectations, it's similar to the word boundary setting. Setting a boundary, setting a stage for what is expected in this house. This is actually a really fun activity if you dive into it. What I mean is you can set the stage by saying, hey guys, at 5 p.m. today, we're gonna set some house rules, right? We're all sharing this house, we're all living under it, and we're trapped in it in this current situation. So we're gonna do a game where we create some house rules. Great. So you've picked a time, totally neutral time, and you've put it in a positive spin. It's not setting the stage of like, okay, we're going to talk about all the bad things that we don't want to do here. You're beginning it positively. Now, when the conversation happens, you can give a statement of concern, but also encouragement. So when we set expectations, we don't set a list of all the things that we're not supposed to be doing. We set the things that we want to be doing. So, hey, I am concerned that there's the dishes are always piling up and it's falling on mom's plate to get them all done. So who thinks that they could be part of this? So there's that encouragement. And I know you guys actually, when I've seen you do the dishes, you're really quite good at it and efficient, especially when you've got that music playing in the background. All right, so give a statement of concern and encouragement. Another thing I actually haven't listed in here, but is really important, is I actually like to start this process by asking the child what they think the expectations should be. So most of the time, if you ask your children, what do you think our house rules should be? They will tell you, and they'll tell you usually pretty honestly. They'll say like, we can't hit each other. We shouldn't be running in the house. We don't, they'll list off all the things that they shouldn't do. I like to start with that so that they have some buy-in, and whatever they say, you can turn it into part of your ground rules and your expectations. So then I need you to set the expectations very clearly. An example of a clear expectation is a couple of words, just a couple of words. Most people tune out after about 7 words. If you start going into a long, soliloquy about all of the things that are expected and why, it's going to get really confusing. So when I set expectations, it might be something like, put your clothes in the laundry basket. All right. These are the things. So let's say we're talking about a teenager. One of the expectations is put your clothes in the laundry basket at the end of the day, and leave it at that. That's one of the house expectations. Does anyone want to put in some expectations in the chat that they might have in their household that they want their children to meet? You're welcome to throw it in the chat, and then Natasha can read it out. You're going to also explain the benefits briefly. So, hey, when you keep your clothes off the floor, that is going to make a lot more time for you to be playing with the iPad. Yeah, go ahead.
No food in your room?
No food in your room. Perfect. Okay.
No drinks in your room?
No drinks in your room. Okay, fantastic. So, hey, kiddo, the expectation, we've got 3 expectations in this house while we're living through this quarantine thing. And you're prioritizing as a parent. You're like, yeah, no drinks in the room because it's causing a pest problem, what have you. All right. The expectation is that you cannot have your drinks in your room. You have to explain the benefit of them meeting that. So what happens if they follow that rule? What's the payoff for them? We might have to think about that. So when we state that expectation, we're not allowed to have drinks in our room. When I'm sure that you're following that expectation, I'm going to maybe extend bedtime for a half an hour, or there's got to be some kind of payoff. With that, I would also suggest putting up a sign on the door of the room, right? No drinks allowed. some kind of prompt. A lot of times, some of these teenager behaviors happen just because they happen and the child is not thinking. So if there can be a payoff for them following that, put that in there. So state the consequence of meeting or not meeting the expectations. You can earn or not earn. So,
We have 2 more.
oh, awesome. Go with those, yeah.
Make your bed and not getting up when you're told.
Amazing.
Super one.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got 3 expectations. One is, oh gosh, sorry, Natasha, can you repeat that? I just had a brain freeze.
Make your bed.
Make your
and
bed. Perfect.
Not getting up told.
Perfect. Okay.
Or when-
So,
Yeah.
again, the making your bed thing, I wouldn't talk about it right after it happens. So let's say that you wake up tomorrow morning and they haven't made their bed and you've told them 20 times that that's the expectation. Pick a neutral time, lunchtime. Hey, Jenny, here's the deal. I've asked you every day to make your bed. So you're giving that statement of concern. And I know that you're waking up really tired and probably not looking forward to a day of online class. I get it. However, the expectation is that you make your bed every day before you come into the kitchen for breakfast. Now we pick a payoff. What is the benefit of Jenny doing that? We want to put that in terms of earning or not earning. So we're forgetting about our coercion and we're looking at what can she earn if she does that. Well, it could be so simple as, earning. I always think of what is the thing that happens naturally after. What do they do right after they come out of their bedroom and they don't make their bed and da-da-da-da-da. That whole morning routine happens. If there's something within that morning routine that they like to do, keep that away and say, oh, wait, we're not going to earn that. We're not going to do that thing until your bed is made. So maybe or you can put in an extra earn, like if you make your bed independently and I don't have to remind you, we're going to earn a point or $1 towards your allowance, what have you. Again, you might think that this is bribing, or it is putting in place a system that you don't want to live forever. But remember, we're getting away from what they should do and we're focusing on the fact that they're not doing it. So we're trying to change that behavior in the short term to create a longer term habit. The other example?
Did a consequence here?
Sorry?
Someone actually posted a consequence.
Awesome.
When you're done, you get an extra 15 minutes on your iPad.
Perfect. Absolutely. Yeah. So you can, whatever those kinds of contingencies are that are motivating for your child, exactly. But you have to tie it to something. And giving that statement of concern, hey, I know that you're tired when you wake up, but I'm concerned your bed is never made and I keep asking you. So I'm going to tie this to something that has a payoff. All right. Sorry, I mixed one, Natasha. Oh, not waking up when they're meant to. This one is hard. So my question would be, is there an alarm clock? For the child?
No, there isn't.
No. Okay. Get those in there, right? So what we want to always do when we look back at those antecedents for escape, clear expectations of follow through. That's where that would fall under, right? I can tell you that you've got to wake up at 6:30 because that's when, our day starts because you've got to be at school, But when it happens, when it's 6:30, you knock on their door, you're like, hey, dude, wake up, and they ignore you. They're a teenager. That's where we have to set a clear expectation for the child that we're going to follow through with that. And the way that I would do that is make absolutely sure that there's an alarm clock or that that when you wake them up, you're following through with waking them up. You've got the lights on, you're blasting some, Soka, you're making noise and you're following through. It is if it's time to wake up, it's time to wake up. If it's not time to wake up and they can sleep in, then that's a question for you to ask yourself. How late? What is the maximum, right? Like, does my child need this extra half an hour? If so, I'm going to tell them that, hey, I know that getting out of bed at 6:30 is hard for you. So I'm going to wake you up at 7 and give you that grace period. However, when I wake you up at 7, I'm going to wake you up. And the payoff is that we don't have to fight about it. Or you can put in some other contingencies. So,
Anoush,
yeah.
I have a question.
Of course.
Someone's saying, is it okay to ask them why the bed's not being made before you tell them to do it?
It's not wrong. However, I would look back at our list of, strategies. The thing is, what do we hope to achieve by asking them? If we can get some information from them by asking that question, by all means, ask it, for sure. There might be a reason, right? Maybe they're like, I don't know how, maybe there's a reason. But if we're asking the question and we don't really think that we're going to get any kind of answer from it or insight into their world, and it's one of those questioning questions, like, how many times have I told you to do this? Then I wouldn't ask it. So it's okay to ask a question as long as you're asking a question for the purpose of information seeking. Avoid asking a question like that. Why aren't you making your bed? It doesn't help if they just say, well, I don't know, because I don't feel like it. That's probably what they're going to say. And if that's probably what they're going to say, don't ask the question. Just go straight into setting the expectation. So what we're doing with setting expectations is that we're trying to minimize undesirable behavior. We're telling the child what it is that we want them to be doing and what the payoff is. Now, we'll dig into it in the next session, but I can start now because we do have some remaining time. When you're thinking about how to connect these new behaviors with a payoff, it might initially seem a bit contrived, but what you have to think about is what is already inside the child's toolbox. What is it that they are already accessing for free, as I like to call it? So particularly, in this time of quarantine or isolation at home, we are all told to stay home, and then we have to wake up and parents have to work from home and children have to do school from home, etc. This is really the time where it's going to be important to hone in and zoom in on what is important, what is going to make the household function, and what are the sort of battles you want to pick and the battles that you don't want to pick. Making your bed in the morning is a great responsibility to pick. It means that parents don't have to take time out of their morning as they're getting ready to work from home. So reduce it down and say, waking up on time, making your bed, and doing your class homework. These are the 3 things that I'm asking you to do. Okay, so start by those 3 things. And maybe when it comes to making the bed, say, hey, look, the first 2 times I'm going to help you so we can see how quick this can actually be done. All right, the first 2 times I'm going to help you. Then if you do this independently, I'm going to tack on an extra 30 minutes of your screen time every day. So I'm focusing on this word teach in that sometimes you do have to throw in that extra effort on your part to make sure that it is the replacement behavior is being taught. When the undesirable behavior happens, we have to make sure it's ineffective. So the child who is ignoring the wake-up call, we just have to make that ignoring not effective. Like, we need to make some noise, and we need to let them know beforehand, hey, this is the deadline. This is the expectation. You've got to wake up. I don't have time in my day to remind you 4 times to wake up. When I give you that wake up call, that's it. I'm going to blast some music and that's it. This is the time that you'll be woken up. And if you get out of bed, there's a payoff. So remember that. It's not just, this is the expectation and there's nothing good that comes of it. It's, hey, when you jump out of bed, oh, I can turn off that annoying music, and maybe it means that you have extra time because you didn't spend that extra time in bed. Maybe that's extra time before school starts with your iPad or something that you like. When you've set expectations and the undesirable behavior still happens, make sure to breeze past it, meaning note it, but focus again on resetting the expectation. Hey, I noticed that you did not make your bed today. Remember, this is one of our ground rules that we have set in place, and we've connected it to this payoff. So tomorrow we're going to try again. So pay attention to the thing that you still want them to see. Tomorrow we're going to try again. I want to see it happen tomorrow. And don't make a huge deal when it doesn't happen, because remember, change doesn't happen overnight. You are going to have to teach it and watch it grow. And then finally, we're going to make sure not to overreact to undesirable behaviors. This one is standard with our training next week when we're talking about ignoring sort of what we call junk behavior. We're going to try to not overreact when the undesirable behavior happens. So a lot of times, if you spend a lot of time setting a very good expectation and you make it really clear, and then it doesn't happen, don't lose your marbles over it. Just reevaluate your system. Maybe your payoff wasn't effective for them. Maybe it was not motivating enough. I can tell you, I've gone to extremes. Like, I've taken the remotes in my sister's household. I just kept the remote controls all day until I had a list of 5 things that were on their chore list. And when they completed their 5 things, they earned access to the remotes. It was very simple in that situation. And when those things didn't happen, I didn't overreact, and I also didn't get in a fight with them about the remotes. They didn't earn them that day, and that was their choice. And I had a very clear cutoff time for when those things had to be done in order to get access. And you can bet when I've held that line, there's going to be a reaction and undesirable behaviors on their end. But you move on when you have set clear expectations. There's no question about fairness, because you set it proactively instead of reactively. So this was our introduction to setting expectations. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to reinforce, how to pivot away from what we call junk behaviors, and combine 4 and 5 together. Does anyone have any questions? We've got a little bit of time still. Does anyone have any questions about what we covered today, or want to go through some more of these examples, or setting expectations and tying it to contingencies?